Today I'm going to be replacing the front driver's side wheel bearing on my Porsche 986, and I'm going to do it with the hub still on the, or with the steering knuckle still on the vehicle, and I'm also going to do it without using arbor press. Instead I'm going to use one of the bolt type pullers. So I'm going to start here on the wheel. I'm going to loosen all these lug nuts, pull out this cap here so that I can loosen the axle bolt before I lift it up. Go. By the way, I've already got the back wheels blocked and jack in position once I'm ready. It's those guys. Now the big gun here. He's always fun. Got him on there. I'm going to use my jack handle to give me some extra purchase on this. But, oh yeah, shouldn't be too bad. There we go. Alright, I'll get that all loosened up. I'll check back with you all in a moment. Alright, car's going up. I generally only go high enough for the wheel to be off the ground, since we're not going to be going under the car. There we go. Could use air tools, but at the end of the day, I oftentimes don't need things that much faster enough to warrant all the bullshit that goes into getting it out. Once we get this wheel off, we'll be able to start removing brake components. Just realizing now, maybe I want to loosen this not all the way off. Yeah, let's do that. Why fight with it later? We can do it now. There we go. Porsche wheels are hub-centric, you all know that. Sometimes they take a little bit of a yank to get them off. Alright, we're going to be moving on to dealing with the brake components. So, in order to do that, we're going to have two bolts back here. They're either, it looks like a 8mm, maybe it's a 10mm hex bolt. There's two of them. We'll have to undo that, and what I would recommend beforehand is a 10mm bolt right back here. Remove that so that you'll be able to hang this caliper, where the hell are we? Hang this caliper somewhere over here while we're working on this region. Alright. 10mm hex nut, or hex bolt, holding the bracket for the hard line on. Let's get that off. There it is. Set it aside with all your other things in places that you won't lose them. Now I'll loosen up those brakes, bolts, one more thing I'm going to do before I really actually fully pull this out is go ahead and give these brake pads a little squeeze. Take some of the pressure off them, and that way we'll be able to pull them out without any like ridges or whatever else that might be on the brake disc, retaining the pad and preventing the easy sliding of the caliper off. I'm just going to go ahead and use a piece of plastic here and just some pliers, nothing special. I just don't want to mar up my calipers that I actually like the look of. There we go, that should be enough. Just go for it. There's the top one out. And let's see. Before I let the bottom one out all the way, I'm going to go ahead and grab my piece of plier that I will use to hold that caliper up. I just like to use a piece of copper wire because it works good every time, and until it stops working good, and keep on doing it. So I just twist it somewhere up here, maybe on the coil here. Maybe come down lower, I don't know. They also make these sort of specialized version of this that's you know, it's like a rubberized piece of metal. But you'll notice what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to send this through, if possible, before I even take off the caliper. That way, if I accidentally drop it, it ain't going far. There's that second caliper bolt. Like I said, put things where you can find them. And there's that caliper coming off easy. I'm just going to finish twisting this copper. Now guess who's got a removed caliper? Use your 10mm that you still have out to go ahead and move the bolt that's, excuse me, up here, holding the like electrical sensor business for the front wheel. Take that off. And actually, while you're at it, the only other thing that electrical connector goes to is the wheel speed sensor. I don't want to take a chance of damaging my wheel speed sensor, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off right now, too. I believe, yeah, it's a 5mm. Or is that 2.5? I think it's 2.5mm, my bad. 2.5mm hex drive. Now, if you're lucky like me and you live someplace like Texas, you don't have rust to deal with. So things like wheel speed sensors come out super easy. Now, our next move is to get this brake disc off. You've all dealt with this before probably, and if not, welcome to one of the shittiest parts of this procedure, which is to say these two Phillips head screws do not ever want to come out. How do you make them come out? Well, what I use is a tap and a hammer. What that's going to do is it's going to knock them loose. So try and get one like this that fits just there. I'm going to go ahead and do that a few times on both of them. If you do that right, you'll be able to just go ahead and grab your Phillips head screwdriver that fits there, and they will come off super easy. I may not be that lucky this time. It may take a few more hits. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, I actually had to switch to doing that right-handed because I'm right-handed, and then I was able to get enough swing. Now these guys should be able to come out easy. I used to be a real Neanderthal about these things. I would either grind them off or, you know, tear them off or slice bigger holes in them, whatever I had to do to get them off. Once I learned that you could just tap them, not tap them, really rap on them actually, and they'd come undone, I look like a pro. Cool, so now we can actually see the hub. Take a look, there's our hub that we're going to be working on. You can see the axle, the stub axle is actually in there loose right now because we already undid that, remember? I'm going to put a slide hammer on here. I'm going to pull this hub off before I move on. Let me get that installed. Alright, for the slide hammer, I don't like to use the bolts that actually belong to my nice Porsche rims, which are these guys, right? Instead, I'll use some of these old Volkswagen ones that I had. Just make sure the pitch is right. And I'm going to go ahead and get this slide hammer mounted on here. The hub-centric blah blah blah, the hub centering ears there, whatever you want to call them, make it hard to get this to fit right. And it may not fit as nice as you would personally prefer, but our goal is just to get enough meat that we're not going to ruin our hub in the process. Let's see what that looks like. 1 and 2. You know, I'm going to pause this for a sec. I don't think you really want to see me take my time doing this. Alright, now they're mostly on there. I'll go ahead and snug them down a little more. The goal here is to basically have the bolt going all the way through, or as close to all the way through the hub as you can. You want to be depending on as many of those threads to pull as possible, because you don't want to strip them out. Guess what? You need them to hold your wheel on your car. So I think I'm in pretty good shape here now. I can feel the bolts just about sticking to the back. There we go. Now the big boy is going to go on. I got this from Harbor Freight. You can get yours from wherever the hell you want to. But for big dumb tools like this, Harbor Freight works fine. Same thing as with those lug nuts. I want to make sure I thread this thing in far enough that it's going through to the other side of the little holder thing. And then you spin this clamping thing down on it. That way it's not moving on you while you're doing your job. Like this, basically, I'm going to do this motion a zillion times. And eventually that hub's going to come out. Made sure to put on my ear stuff. It took me 31 strokes, but this one came off nice. Last time I had the bearing race come out with it on the other side, but this side I just got my hub off, so I'm pretty happy. Alright, our next step is we're going to remove the sway bar link. Sway bar link, let's take a look. Let's see. See if you can see what I see. Sway bar link, it's right here. Right? It's got a nut on the back side of it. We're going to undo that nut, and in order to keep it from spinning, we're going to undo right there. And also you may have to lift this up from underneath with a jack stand to take the pressure off the sway bar link so that you can actually extract it. I'm gonna go ahead and get what I need there right now. All right, I got my second jack here. Instead of going on the nice aluminum arm, I'm gonna go under the attachment point for whatever that front arm thing is there on that makes up the control arm. The bolt there. That's a lot harder than aluminum is. And like I said, I'm just going to lift this enough so I take the pressure off of my sway bar link. The sway bar link on mine, and this has been replaced before, so yours might be a different size, but is an 18 millimeter nut. And I have, let's see, what size is this? Let's say 17 millimeter wrench will hold it on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and get that positioned someplace that I like it. My goal all the time with these things is not to ruin the boot and have to replace the sway bar link. In general, that's my methods for everything. I don't want to have to replace parts that aren't broken because I was being mean to them. And this one's behaving very nicely. In fact, I didn't even have to use that wrench on the back side to keep it from spinning. Might be because there's still a little bit of pressure on it. Go, that nut's out. You know what? I got it right there. Might as well do it. I'm going to undo the bottom side of this sway bar link too. That happens to be a 17 rather than an 18. Go figure. Nope, 16. And if I remember from yesterday, the front side of it is actually like a 14 or something like that. So your mileage may vary, as they say. There we go. Bottom part of it's out. I'm going to put the nut right back on it. Sorry, you can't see that very well. Bottom part of the sway bar link. Top part. It's probably going to need a little tap to take it out. My trick for that is to take your nut, put it back on. Till it's about, oops. Till it's just about flush with the surface. This is going to protect the threads and make sure that when you give it a little tap, you don't mar those threads. You give yourself a wider surface to hit too, which I prefer. Now guess who's coming out? Sway bar link. I took the pressure off just now because I realized that this also retains the strut, and so in that way it still had pressure on it. But now, it's coming right out. There it is. Removed. Cool. Alright, now I'm going to take this hub retainer off. I believe it is a 13 millimeter. I'm correct for once. Let's see. Keep track of your tools. Put them away as you stop using them, and that way they'll always be where you need them to be. Let me get all four of these loosened up. This is going to allow us to extract the bearing later. Oh, one random tip here. Careful with this brake shield. If if you bend it in the process, make sure you bend it back. If you don't, you're gonna drive your car after getting this all fixed and you hear horrible squealing noises and worry that you did something really bad. Did this yesterday, and I realized all it was this brake shield and had to pull the wheel back off to bend it back. This, all these bolt holes are actually asymmetric. There's a little nubby in the cutout at the very bottom that orients which way this will go back on. Take a look. Notch. Nubby, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, now when we're ready, we'll be able to pull this guy out. Before we can do that, we actually need to be able to get this stub axle out of the way. The only way out is through the back. How are you going to get it out through the back? You're going to have to lift this strut up so that bottom of it that you see there is no longer in your way. We got a ways to go, but by doing this, we don't have to undo the ball joint and potentially damage it, or what the hell is this thing called? Tie rod end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy here. I'm going to put it back through that hole that the sway bar link came out, and that's just going to hold the steering knuckle and the strut as one. And I'm going to jack this thing up till it's fully compressed. Now, many of you may use spring compressors for jobs like this. I found what works really good, especially since I'm not positioning myself underneath this at any point in time, is just like a ratchet strap or a cam lock strap, because I can get it to weave around the springs really easy and then wrap it around the base of the strut. And in that way, I'll be able to keep this thing fully compressed way up here, just till you're about lifting the car. Let me go grab my strap. All right, some of you may be concerned about the safety of this method. Let me tell you what. The only thing less safe than using nylon web strapping for holding up your spring, actually let's see, can I go right to the top, is trying to use those spring compressors when they don't fit, you don't have clearance for them, and then they eventually slip off and then you die. I don't like that idea, so I use nylon webbing. I'm going to put it on right now, then I'll show you once it's finished. Alright, I'm just about done here. Take a look. I was actually able to go all the way up around the top mounting bracket. This, though, should be pretty good. Want to see? Let's find out. Well, let's go ahead and pull this out. Oh, actually, we can't do that yet. Alright, let's lower the jack, see what we get. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work and nobody's hurt. How's it doing? Pretty good. Look at that. Wow. Alright. Get that out. Cool. Let me grab a rubber hammer, or nylon hammer, I guess it is. This guy here. And look at all that clearance we're making. I've already slid it out 2 inches. Just starting to create the clearance we're going to need back here to get this stub axle out. We've obviously got a bit more to go, but we'll get there. Alright, what I did, got a little further here now. What you can see is through that hole right there. I'm going to be able to put that rod that I had earlier, this guy, back through it as needed with the different holes to keep my progress so I don't lose out on what I'm doing. You can also use one of these guys. Don't depend on it, it's just helping you hold. This edge will go under the bottom of the strut, and this top edge can go right at the top of the steering knuckle, right next to the strut body. what you can do is use that to sort of maintain your progress. Try not to stretch your strut body if at all possible, because then it's a place where oxidation can happen. But if you've done this right, you can get to a point where your stub axle comes out without ever having to remove your ball joint or your tie rod end. And I've got this pin through there now, so even if for some reason my strap let loose, guess what? The strut ain't going anywhere. It's held in place right where we want it. And now we can move on to extracting the bearing. It's just sitting in here waiting for us to do the job. Let me get my tools. Alright, you guys have probably seen these kind of kits before. I sell them on, I think I got it on Amazon for like 40 bucks. I was feeling pretty good about that. Need those two pieces. And let's see, which one do I remember? Is it you? Maybe you. Okay, we're gonna need those pieces there. Need this guy here. These thrust washers, super important. And also the big fat nut. I'm gonna get this all together. Let me put you over here for a moment. How this works. By the way, I just used these yesterday, so I have these thrust washers nice and greased already. Go ahead and re-grease them with whatever the hell you want, as well as the threads of this shaft. You want to make everything rotate smoothly. Find whichever one of these discs can actually go and sit inside the backside right against the face of the bearing. If it doesn't sit against the face of the bearing, this is not going to work. You need to have it fit against whatever part of the bearing is available from the backside. So I'm going through a couple of these trying to find the right one that fits where I need it to. Oh, perfect. In my kit, this one ended up being number 955-07. I have no clue what those numbers refer to, but that one fits. I'm going to go ahead and take this guy, the one that I picked, through, slide it through the back side. So we got bolt, washer, big ass adapter washer thing that fits against the bearing, the cup, the top of the cup, another washer. Now I picked this cup specifically because it's large enough to be beyond the diameter of the bearing, and that's so that the bearing can be pulled inside of it. If you pick one that is too small, you're not going to be able to pull the bearing out. So it's better to oversize this outside one than undersize it. Screwing the nut on here. Like I said, I already lubricated this. I might lubricate it more. You don't want to ruin the threads on your tool. You want to extract the bearing. So be smart. Alright, now in the case of my tool, the bolt is, I think, like 27 millimeter on the back side. 27? About, maybe it's an inch, I don't know. This guy's going to hold it just fine though. The front side, I'm actually going to use the same socket I used for removing the wheel bearing. That's my Greyhound, don't worry about her. She's making trouble. One moment. Alright, we're ready to start the bearing extrusion process. I have that cup thing. I want to try and center it as much as I can. Tap it around until... I'm actually going to use those 4 bolt holes from earlier to kind of, from the bearing retainer plate, to sort of tell me if I'm centered. Now I can start turning this thing clockwise. Now what I recommend is have yourself a good hammer. So as needed throughout the entire process, you can tap. Tapping is going to loosen this up so that you don't put too much strain on those threads. You'll know when it's starting to come out. It'll start coming out easier. Until then, use that hammer. And only turn a little bit at a time. I got my wrench that's on the bolt pinned against the control arm right now, which is why I only have to deal with this front side. But guess what? This thing's moving. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Turn it till it doesn't feel good. This setup should not start feeling hot. If it does, that means you're being mean to your threads on your tool. Don't be mean to the threads on your tool. You want to be able to use it more than once. Cool. It's coming out easy now. If you're lucky, to the point where you can do this rather quick. Get your workout in for the day. Starting to get a little warm. We're also right near the end, so not too worried. You can switch to a ratchet wrench if you want to. But anyway, guess who just got their old wheel bearing out? This guy. I'm gonna undo the setup now. You know what we're gonna find? A wheel bearing. There it is, the oldie. Check that bad boy out. It's still okay. One of the front ones was making noise. I didn't know which one. They were cheap. I decided to get both. Let me go grab my other one from the freezer. As some of you know, if you put your bearings in the freezer before you install them, they shrink down. That makes them slide in a lot easier. Also, give yourself a little lubrication to help yourself out. I like to use silicone lubricant whenever possible. I don't know if there's a reason why I shouldn't be using it here, just to slip the bearing in. If I do, let me know, but guess what? It's been working for a long time for me. Let me go get that bearing. Alright, I got my new guy here, fresh from the freezer. There's writing on one side of the bearing, not on the other side, on the inner race. The side that has the writing apparently is supposed to go in, from what I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm going to do it anyway, because I don't got a good reason to be worried one way or another. Now in this case, we're actually doing the opposite of what we did earlier, in that we're trying to push this bearing in. So one of the things that's important this time is to make sure that we actually have something on here that's large enough to be bigger than the opening on the bearing pocket. Reason for that is we need to be able to pull the bearing in here this time. Alright. And same thing for the outside face. See that big fatty fat. That works. Rust washer. Nut. going on. Just like before, make sure everything's centered. You want to drive that bearing straight in. You don't want to find out later that you put it in crooked. It's crooked bearings. They're not good bearings. Take my wrench, put it on that backside nut. Like I said, make sure everything's centered if you need to. Give things a tap till they are. And this new bearing should go in pretty easy. Because guess what? We froze it down. It's a little shrunky. Oh yeah. Sliding right in. Without issue. Perfectly centered. Not having to take the knuckle off to use an arbor press. This is a win. As far as I'm concerned. If you do see this little off center, a little tap. Don't make it do bad things. Back it off a little bit. Make sure I have everything where I like it. I'm not going to make you watch this whole process. It'll go in. All right, now we're cooking. One of the cool things about keeping everything connected, that steering knuckle only moves so much. Don't worry about the thing flying all over the place while you're trying to do work. One of the things I hate about arbor presses is trying to fit an oddly shaped steering knuckle perfectly into your press with all of its weird little parts sticking off. All right, I think I'm all the way in there. I'm gonna give it a tap to hopefully drive everything home. Find out what we're looking at. Oh yeah, I think we're there. So much easier than the first time. I was trying to follow a much more complicated protocol before coming up with this one. So I was trying to undo all those different components. Some of them weren't budging. Just wasn't pleasant. But now, hopefully what you can see here is I've got my new wheel bearing installed. I'm going to go ahead and take one of these cups that just barely fit over the race and give it a little bit of the outer race, that is, and give it a little tap here. Make sure it's fully seated. I don't want to find out later, or in this case try and depend on the holder to keep it where it needs to be. That should be good. But speaking of the holder, retainer, whatever you want to call it, we can put that down now if we want to. Yeah, one damn thing in the world stopping us from doing it. Sorry, you can't see that very well. My knee's in the way, can you? Bearing ain't coming out. Not after this. I'll stay in there forever. For another 145,000 miles. I guess in this case, seeing that's how many miles I have on my Boxster. These are steel screws going into an aluminum knuckle. Don't hurt them. You don't want to strip them out, but make sure they're on there tight enough. Hell, if you want to be professional, use a torque wrench. I get that hub on now. If, like on my first one, you end up having one of the inner races left on the hub here, use a Dremel or a cutoff wheel to cut 2 little grooves in it. Not so deep that they actually hit the hub, but just cut through the inner race. You can put a chisel in there and whack it off. Eventually it might even crack into 2 pieces, which would be really awesome because then it'll just fall off. But try not to damage this. Alright. We're going in now. I'm not going to put any of that silicone spray on this guy. But if yours looks messed up in any way, go ahead and clean it up. Reason being is this actually is going to interface with the oils in the bearing, the grease, and I don't know if they're compatible, so I don't want to make any mistakes that I regret with early bearing failure. Because as quick as this is this time, I don't want to have to do it again. Alright, here's my hub. We're going to be using our bearing press tool again. In this case, we only want to be pushing on the inner races. So you need something that's going to fit on the back side there. Inside the recess. That's there. I think this is the one that worked earlier. Let's see. Okay, that's my goodie. Alright, he needs bolt, washer, adapter. Coming through the back side. Hub. And approximately fitted. I use whatever big guy you want to. If you want to push on those guys, or on the other hand, if you want to, you can fit something that goes right in the middle there. I just did this by pushing on these ears yesterday. And you know what? Worked fine. I'm going to do it again. Guy on there, that guy on there. Where's the nut for it? Here it is. I'm not following my own tool cleaning procedures. I tried. Alright, make sure everything's centered. If it is, your life will be easier. This process is very similar to the original seating of the bearing. In this case, wow, this thing's going in by hand. Maybe that's bad, good, I don't know. It is what it is. Get my wrench on here. And start driving this home. The hub's probably going to spin while you do this. Who cares? It's taking some of the rotational force off. This side, man, these hubs going a lot easier than the bearing goes in. Wow, I'm almost there. Ooh. It'll eventually bottom out. You don't have to like cram it or anything like that, because you'll be able to do that later once the stub axle's in. Right. That's all for our bearing press tool. I'm going to remove it right now. So if it's not clear to you by now, guess what? You got your new bearing installed. Now we got to put everything else back together. Starting with that stub axle. The reason why, by the way, that I removed the sensor for the ABS because it goes on this tooth gear. I didn't want to mess it up when I was trying to pull this out. Now, if you did this like I did, you may find you actually don't have quite as much clearance as you thought you did. In my case, that's because I had the hub out earlier. I don't have the hub out anymore. And in fact, you could have actually used the hub as your tool for pulling the, or you could have used your stub axle to pull your hub on. If I had done that, I wouldn't have to do what I'm going to do right now, which is to say I'm going to cinch up this shock a little more using the same method I showed you earlier to give me just a little more clearance. Alright, I actually just used that, this guy here. Let's see. I use this guy here, went from the top of the strut tower, or right there from the strut to the top of the knuckle. It just gave me that much more clearance, which was enough to get the stub axle through. Stub axle's in. In fact, let's go ahead and just get the nut started on it. I'll put you back down over here. You're not going to be able to tighten that up until you have everything back on, so let's start that process. Everything over here is good now. You know, the bearing's in place, so I got to get that strut tower back down. Easiest way to do that, pull out that pin that's been holding it. Now what you can do is jack the steering knuckle back up, and I want to go high enough, let it go right up. It's like, bring me back home. Go high enough that you'll be able to take your sway bar link, pass it back through that hole. Damn, making this look easy. If you did it right, you'll be able to put a little more pressure on here, get that spring to compress a bit more. You'll be able to pull your strap off. Tell me that's not easier than pulling your whole hub out. I don't ever want to do that even on a bad day. Guess what? Didn't have to. Do, however, need to find the nut. I already put it on. Alright, I'm going to take the pressure off here because that sway bar link is now holding that knuckle onto the strut. Now this guy can come out of the way. And start tightening things. Once again, you want to be a pro, doing track days, whatever. Use a torque wrench. Do I own one? Yes. I'm going to use, what do we call, mechanics feel. You know, you eventually learn how tight these things have to go. Become your torque wrench. And if you're the one that removed them, you're good at idea what it felt like. Got the case again. Alright, that's the top part of the sway bar. Get my jack back under here. Lift this up enough to get that bottom part of the sway bar back in. Could I have done this without removing the bottom part of the sway bar? Maybe. Guess what? That one's actually easy to undo without damaging anything. And it gets the whole thing out of your way. So you can use it later as a tool, like we did while we were installing. bottom part of the sway bar, top part of the sway bar going through. There's the nut I just tightened there. Next nut's back here. I'm gonna get that tightened. Like I said, in my case, it's 16 millimeter. In fact, what I'm gonna do right now, a little cheater move. I'm gonna take the pressure back off this with that nut mostly seated. The reason why I'll do that is so that I can loosen it, or so I can tighten it without necessarily having to put another wrench on the other side, because the pressure of the suspension is going to keep it from moving. Let's get it tighter. Alright, coming down. Sway bar link tighten the rest of the way. That's how you get your workout. It's starting to move a little bit. I don't want that. Put a little wrench on here. There we go. Okay. I'm gonna put this guy back on. You know, maybe I didn't have to undo this side. I don't know. We got our wheel speed sensor here. There he is. Get him back in there. Also from Harbor Freight. Don't let anybody lead you to believe you can't get the job done with Harbor Freight tools. Because most of them you can. Even if it's a Porsche. It's just tightening that nut over here, which holds the electronics adapter on. You don't need to go crazy, it's just plastic. On the other side, we're going to attach the one. Let's see, I guess we're going to be getting our brake caliper in place. Oh, ha! Almost did the bad thing. Put your brake discs on before your brake caliper. Works a lot better that way. Now's a great time to check and make sure that your discs are within spec as far as thickness is concerned. I'm just trying to line up those holes for the Phillips head screwdrivers, or for the Phillips head. Guys, here. Is that them? Nope. I'll find them. Yeah, they are. Two little Phillips head screws that hold the disc on. Oh, this would have been a great time if you had brakes to do, discs to replace, sway bar links, all that kind of stuff. Could have wrapped that into this project pretty easily. In my case, I'd already done all those things. Maybe the other way to look at it is I should have done the wheel bearings when I did them. You ask a lot out of your wheel bearings. A lot of pressure is putting on them. The fact that in this case the original front wheel bearings lasted about 145,000 miles from Porsche, I'm pretty happy about. Oh, you know what? Let's not be evil here. I'm gonna grab some anti-seize to put on those little brake disc retainer screws. So the next guy that comes along is most likely going to be me. Doesn't have to fight with them. I guess in this case it means you have to know where your anti-seize is. I wasn't too far away. It takes so little to make your life so much better. Don't buy the little packets, just buy a tube of it, because every time you do a project, you're probably going to need some. And those little packets are like one-time use. And the tube of it lasts much longer. And it's like $3 or $4, so be a gem. Look at that. There's not a lot that are asked out of these screws. I'm not so surprised that rust creeps in there. Especially up north more. Grew up in New Hampshire. And these kinds of things sucked because there were always worst case scenario happening constantly. There we go. These two big boys. Bink. Get them started. If you can. That way your brake disc ain't going anywhere. So you get everything out, or your brake caliper isn't going anywhere. When you undo this copper wire. It's out. Copper is nice because it has much less of a tendency to scratch than other materials. Say like a steel wire or something like that. Obviously rubber is even better, but plastic. But copper is nice because it just, you twist it and you go. If your bolts here were like mine, they had a little bit of anti-seize, not anti-seize, thread lock on them. I guess I could have put more on. Probably should have. Oh well. Those are good. Got a little 10mm bolt that holds on the retainer for the brake line and the sensor. Go ahead and get that back in place. Now, believe it or not, we're just about back where we started. Who's left? No one. Why? Because we didn't really take that many things apart. And that is a win in my book. I'm going to grab my wheel hair here. Get ready to put it on. Line everybody up nicely. Use the existing brake dust to help me position this on the caliper. And the fact that I still have those little caliper, on the disc. The fact that I still have the, there's retainer screws on the disc means the disc isn't spinning. So I don't have to worry about lining up the disc with the hub. I'm just worried about lining up the wheel, the hub. Which is the easier thing to do. It'd be nice to have one of those newer Porsches with the center rings for the rest of us. And keep on doing this the old-fashioned way. Alright, here's mostly tight. I'm gonna lower my jack just enough to get this wheel to touch the ground. But it didn't go far enough. That'll do. Bring these guys home. Once again, you don't feel confident knowing how tight these needs to go. There's a lug wrench. Oh, not a lug wrench, a torque wrench. All right. Speaking of torque wrenches, I might actually use one for the center nut. Before I tighten this, I'll let this jack down the rest of the way. I didn't use jack stands because I never got under the car. If for any reason you think there's any chance you'll be getting under it, use a jack stand. It's cheap insurance. What's it supposed to be on these center nuts? Like 150 Newton meters or something? I don't know, something like that. 200? I don't know, I just put 200 on there. All right. You know what? A little extra hard either. Go. Final step. Cap back on. Ready to tighten down our lug nuts, so clean up your tools. You got a new wheel bearing installed. Take care.